If someone had told me a year ago that my life, my meticulously curated, beige-toned, predictable life, would be upended by a 22-year-old intern, I would have laughed. A dry, quiet laugh, the kind you learn when you spend most of your time alone in the silent company of historical documents. My world was one of acid-free paper and climate-control vaults, of quiet routine and the carefully managed distance I kept between myself and everyone else. It was a fortress built of solitude, and I was its willing, lonely king. My days were a metronome. Wake at 6. Black coffee. 2 pieces of toast. No butter. Walk to the municipal archives. Spend 8 hours cataloging the city's forgotten history. Walk home. A simple meal. A book. Sleep. Repeat. It was a life lived in monochrome, a deliberate choice to avoid the messy, unpredictable chaos of color, of feeling. And then Cale arrived. He was not beige. He was a supernova in the muted gray of our office. He was introduced on a Monday morning, all broad shoulders in a ridiculously well-fitted shirt, a shock of dark hair that fell over one eye, and a smile that felt less like a greeting and more like a challenge. He was the new digital archiving intern, a temporary disruption I was tasked to oversee. He moved with an easy confidence that bordered on arrogance. He took up space. His voice, a low baritone, cut through the library-like hush of our department. He smelled faintly of cedar and something sharp, like ozone after a storm. I found his presence immediately, intensely irritating. He was a physical fact in my abstract world. While I dealt with the ghosts of the past, he was aggressively present. He would lean over my shoulder to look at my monitor, his warmth a palpable heat against my back. He would tap his pen against his desk, a restless energy bleeding into my quiet corner. He was everything I was not. Loud, sure, and impossibly alive. From the safety of my cubicle, I observed him. It was my nature, after all, to catalog, to analyze. I noted the way his jaw clenched when he was concentrating, the slight, almost imperceptible scar that cut through his left eyebrow. I saw the way his confident facade would sometimes crack, revealing a flicker of uncertainty when our department head, Mr. Albright, gave him a complex task. He was a puzzle, a vibrant, frustrating contradiction. And the most frustrating part was the unwelcome pull he exerted on my attention. My gaze would drift to him against my will, tracing the line of his shoulders or the curve of his neck. It was a purely academic interest, I told myself. An archivist's curiosity. A lie I repeated like a prayer. The distance between us was a chasm. He was the intern. I was his supervisor. He was youth and potential. I was settled. 35 and set in my ways. He was a temporary fixture, a summer project. I was a permanent part of the building's foundation. There was no bridge across that divide. I made sure of it. My feedback was always professional, my interactions brief and to the point. I kept the wall of my solitude high and reinforced. For 2 months, this was our rhythm. An uncomfortable orbit, a gravitational pull I fought with every fiber of my being. I was safe in my gray world. I was. The disruption came, as disruptions often do, without warning. It was a Friday in late October. A storm had been threatening all day, the sky outside our tall, arched windows a bruised purple. The wind howled, a mournful sound that vibrated through the old stone building. Most everyone had left early, eager to beat the worst of it. I was packing up, my hand on my coat, when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they died, plunging the vast hall into a thick, disorienting darkness. The emergency lights kicked in a moment later, casting long, eerie shadows, but the deep, vital hum of the servers in the basement went silent. A profound, terrible silence. My heart plummeted. The server hum was the building's heartbeat. Its silence meant our entire digital archive, millions of files, decades of work was offline, at risk. Mr. Albright called my desk phone, his voice tinny and frantic over the battery backup. Leo, the main server array is down. The backup generator failed to kick in. I can't get anyone from IT until morning with this storm. You're the only one who knows the old system. You have to see if you can get it back online. And then, the word that would change everything. Kale is still there, right? He knows the new hardware. You'll need him. Keep me posted. The line went dead. I was left in the ghostly light, the silence pressing in. Not alone. I turned, and there he was, standing at the edge of the emergency lighting's glow. Kale. His usual confident smirk was gone, replaced by a look of genuine concern. He was already shrugging off his jacket. Guess we're not going home, he said, his voice quiet in the cavernous room. The storm raged outside, trapping us. The building, usually a place of quiet order, felt like a ship lost at sea, and I was trapped on it with him. The fortress walls were about to be breached. We descended into the basement, into the server room. The air was cool and still, the silence here even more profound. Usually, it was a whirlwind of fans and blinking lights. Now it was a tomb, a digital graveyard. My stomach was a knot of pure anxiety. Okay, I said, my voice sounding thin. Let's start with the power supply units. We need to see why the generator transfer failed for the next few hours. We worked. We fell into an unexpected rhythm. He knew the physical architecture, the intricate wiring and hardware I hadn't touched in years. I knew the software, the legacy code, the system's digital soul. We were two halves of a whole, a strange and efficient team. The close quarters of the server room stripped away our professional distance. We were just two people fighting a common enemy. The air crackled with a different kind of energy now, not antagonism, but a shared, focused intensity. And in that proximity, I started to see him, really see him. Not the arrogant intern, but the person underneath. I saw the faint tremor in his hand as he reseated a power cable, a sign of fatigue or maybe nerves. I noticed the tiny flecks of green in his dark brown eyes, visible only in the focused beam of my flashlight. I saw the calluses on his knuckles when he handed me a wrench. These weren't the hands of someone who spent his life behind a keyboard. These were hands that had worked, that had built things, fixed things. It was another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. He was surprisingly kind. He must have noticed I was shivering in the cold room, and he draped his jacket over my shoulders without a word. The heavy wool was warm and smelled of him, that cedar and ozone scent. It felt like an electric blanket, a shocking, overwhelming intimacy. I muttered a thank you, my face burning. Hours bled together, marked only by the rising fury of the storm outside. We worked side by side, our shoulders sometimes brushing, our arms grazing as we reached into the server racks. Each point of contact was a small explosion on my skin, a jolt that shot straight to my core. My carefully constructed defenses were crumbling with every accidental touch. Then it happened, the moment that fractured everything. I was trying to reconnect a deeply recessed fiber optic cable, my fingers too clumsy in the tight space. I dropped the small precision screwdriver. It clattered on the floor and rolled under the server rack. I'll get it, we both said at the same time. We both bent down, reaching into the darkness under the machine. My hand, searching blindly, found his. It wasn't a brush. It was a solid, undeniable connection. His fingers, warm and strong, closed instinctively around mine. Time stopped. The hum of the emergency lights, the howl of the wind, it all faded away. All I could feel was the rough texture of his calluses against my palm, the heat of his skin, the sheer, solid presence of his hand holding mine. A current, live and dangerous, passed between us. My heart, a frantic, trapped bird, hammered against my ribs. This is it. This is the feeling I've been running from. I pulled my hand back as if I'd been burned. A sharp, involuntary gasp escaped my lips. I straightened up too quickly, my head hitting the underside of the rack with a dull thud. Ow! I breathed, more from the shock than the pain. Kale emerged a second later, the screwdriver in his other hand. His face was unreadable in the dim light, his eyes dark and intense. The air between us was thick, charged with unspoken words. The silence stretched, taut and fragile. He didn't smile. He didn't make a joke. He just watched me, his gaze searching my face. "You okay, Leo?" he asked, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. I couldn't answer. I just nodded, taking the screwdriver from him, my fingers fumbling. Our hands didn't touch this time, but the phantom sensation of his grip lingered, a brand on my skin. The thaw had begun. A crack had formed in the eyes, and I was terrified of the flood that was coming. We got the power rerouted. The machines began to stir, lights blinking to life one by one. But the system wouldn't boot. It was hanging on a single line of code in the startup sequence. A legacy security protocol. My legacy security protocol, written over a decade ago. Kale, the tech prodigy, stared at the screen, baffled. He ran diagnostics. He tried to bypass it. Nothing worked. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. The confidence was gone. He looked young and lost. He turned to me, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I don't get it. This code, it's like a fossil. I can't break it. What is it? And just like that, the dynamic shifted. He was the intern again, and I was the senior archivist. But it wasn't about hierarchy anymore. He was asking for help. He was vulnerable. He was looking at me not as a supervisor, but as someone who had the answer he needed. It's a logic gate, I explained, my voice steady for the first time in hours. I felt a flicker of my old, comfortable competence return. It requires a specific input key based on the archival date of a corresponding physical document. It was a way to ensure a human archivist was always present during a hard reboot. His eyes widened slightly. You're kidding. That's arcane. Obsolete, it's secure, I said, a hint of pride in my voice. The document is in the main vault. Number 734. B. He looked at me, a new respect dawning in his expression. You built this. A long time ago, I admitted. I led the way to the vault, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the oppressive dark. I spun the heavy dial, the familiar clicks echoing in the silence. The massive door swung open, and we stepped into the cold, still air that smelled of old paper and time itself. I found the file. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a long, alphanumeric key. As I came back out, I saw him standing there, just watching me. He wasn't looking at the file. He was looking at me. You're full of surprises, Leo, he said, and it wasn't a compliment or an insult. It was a simple statement of fact, a reevaluation. We returned to the server room. The air was still thick with the memory of our hands touching. I typed in the code. The system accepted it. With a final, satisfying whir, the main array spun up. The screens filled with familiar data. The heartbeat was back. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. We had done it. I leaned against the server rack, my legs suddenly weak. Kale let out a long, slow breath. He didn't cheer. He just sank into the room's only chair, looking utterly exhausted. The adrenaline that had sustained us for hours vanished, leaving a heavy, bone-deep weariness in its place. The storm still battered the building. We were still trapped. But now, without a crisis to focus on, there was only the silence. And us. The server room, once a place of frantic work, now felt impossibly small and intimate. The hum of the machines was a low, steady drone. The only light came from the blue and green glow of the monitors, painting our faces in strange, shifting colors. It felt like a world unto itself, a pocket of existence separate from everything else. I slid down the wall to sit on the floor, my knees aching. I was too tired to stand, too tired to pretend. The carefully constructed walls of professionalism had been washed away by the storm and the shared crisis. Kale swiveled the chair to face me. He didn't speak for a long time. He just watched me with that same searching intensity from before. It made my skin prickle. It felt like he could see right through me, past the quiet archivist to the lonely man hiding inside. "Why do you do that?" he asked finally, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. My heart stuttered. "Do what?" "Look at me like I'm a document you're trying to date," he said. "Like you're trying to find the watermark." The forgery, the observation was so sharp, so accurate, it stole the air from my lungs. I had no defense, no witty retort, just the raw, exposed truth. My face flushed with heat. I don't know what you mean," I stammered a pathetic lie. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Yeah, you do. From my first day. You've been watching me, sizing me up, but not like a boss. Like something else. Like you're waiting for me to fall apart." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the monitor light carving shadows under his cheekbones. He looked beautiful and dangerous. For the record, he continued, his voice dropping even lower, I am falling apart, I mean. This whole thing. This internship. It's a sham. I stared at him, speechless. This was the confession. His, not mine. And it was nothing I could have ever predicted. My dad, he said, looking at his calloused hands. He owns a construction company back home. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's what these hands are for. But I hate it. I hate the noise, the dust, the expectations. He looked up, his eyes finding mine in the gloom. I love this. The quiet. The order. The idea that you can save something. Preserve it. But to him, this is a waste of time. It's not real work, so I came here to prove a point. To myself, mostly. I acted like I owned the place because if I didn't, I felt like I was going to drown. His vulnerability was a physical blow. It shattered the image I had of him, the arrogant, confident kid. In its place was someone just as lost and afraid as I was. Maybe more so. The puzzle of him clicked into place, and the picture it formed was one of profound loneliness. A loneliness that mirrored my own. I didn't think anyone noticed, he finished, his voice barely a whisper. But you did. You saw it, didn't you? My throat was tight. All I could do was nod. Silence descended again, but it was different now. It was filled with his confession, with the truth hanging raw and shimmering in the air between us. He had shown me his real self. The question was, what would I do with it? He stood up from the chair and walked over to me. He crouched down in front of me, so we were at eye level. He was so close I could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the fatigue etched around his eyes. He smelled of hard work and wool and the faint, clean scent of rain. Leo, he said, and the way he said my name sent a shiver through me. It wasn't my supervisor's name. It was mine. What are you so afraid of? The question hit me like a physical impact. What was I afraid of? Everything. This. Him. The frantic bird in my chest that beat its wings harder every time he was near. The hope, terrifying and fragile, that his presence sparked in the monochrome landscape of my life. I couldn't find the words, so I just shook my head, a helpless gesture. He reached out, his movements slow, deliberate. He gave me every opportunity to pull away, to retreat back into my fortress. His fingers gently touched my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. The touch was electric, 1,000 times more potent than when our hands had met. It was intentional. It was a question. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. I leaned into his touch, my eyes fluttering shut. It was a surrender, a confession of my own, made without a single word. He leaned in closer. I could feel his breath on my lips, warm and soft. My own breathing hitched. This is happening. This is real. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. And then he kissed me. It was not a frantic, passionate kiss. It was slow, hesitant. It was a question and an answer all at once. His lips were soft, tentative against mine. It was a kiss of shared loneliness, of unexpected understanding. It was a quiet discovery in the heart of a storm. I brought my hand up to his neck, my fingers tangling in the soft hair at his nape, pulling him fractionally closer. He let out a soft sound, a sigh of relief or release, and the pressure of his mouth increased, becoming more confident, more sure. It felt like coming home to a place I had never been before. It tasted of coffee and exhaustion and a desperate, unspoken longing. For the first time in a decade, the king was leaving the fortress. The walls were tumbling down. The morning came, pale and gray. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and unervingly quiet. The power was back on across the city. The building was stirring back to life. Our isolated bubble had burst. I woke up stiffly, still on the floor of the server room, Cale's jacket a heavy weight over me. He was asleep in the chair, his head lolled to one side, his dark hair falling across his face. In sleep, he looked younger, the lines of stress and forced confidence smoothed away. My heart ached with a terrifying tenderness. I watched him for a long time, replaying the kiss, the confession, the feeling of his hand on my face. It felt like a dream, a beautiful, impossible dream. And as the sun rose higher, casting normal, everyday light into the room, the anxiety began to creep in. A cold, slithering dread. Reality was back. We were supervisor and intern. We were two men in a workplace where last night was complicated, unspoken. What had felt so right and inevitable in the bubble of the storm now felt reckless and terrifying in the light of day. I must have made a sound because his eyes fluttered open. He looked at me, and for a split second, I saw the same warmth, the same connection from the night before. Then he blinked. He sat up straight, and the mask slammed back into place. He stood, stretching, avoiding my gaze. The confident, aloof intern was back. The air, which had been so charged with intimacy, was suddenly thick with awkwardness. "System stable," he said, his voice all business. He walked over to a monitor, typing something. "Looks like we're all good here." My heart sank into my stomach, a cold, heavy stone. He regrets it. The thought screamed in my mind. It was a mistake, a product of exhaustion and a weird situation. I should go," he said, still not looking at me. He grabbed his own jacket, the one he'd worn before giving me his. He wouldn't even take his back from my shoulders. "Get a shower before Albright gets here, Kale." I started, my voice a croak. I didn't even know what I was going to say. He turned, finally, but his eyes were guarded. The vulnerability was gone, locked away. "Thanks for the help with the legacy code, Leo. I learned a lot." He gave me a tight, professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a dismissal. A wall slammed up between us. And then he was gone. I was left alone in the server room. The hum of the machines sounded mocking. I slowly took off his jacket, the fabric now cold. I folded it carefully, as if it were a precious, fragile artifact. The scent of him still clung to it. My fortress was in ruins around me, and I was standing alone in the rubble. The silence that rushed in to fill his absence was heavier and more painful than any solitude I had ever known before. The weekend was a special kind of hell. I wandered my quiet apartment like a ghost. Every silence was filled with the memory of his voice. Every empty space was shaped like him. The monochrome world I had so carefully cultivated was back, but it was no longer a comfort. It was a punishment. It was a constant reminder of the vibrant color I had tasted for just a few hours and then lost. I replayed every moment in my head. The accidental touch, his confession, the kiss. Had I misread everything? Had I imagined the tenderness, the connection? Was I just a convenient port in a storm for a confused, stressed-out kid? The self-doubt was a poison, seeping into every thought. I felt like a fool, an old, naive fool. Monday morning was torture. I walked into the office, my stomach a churning sea of bees. I dreaded seeing him. I craved seeing him. The contradiction was tearing me apart. He was already at his desk, staring intently at his screen. He looked like he hadn't slept all weekend. He didn't look up when I walked past. The day was a study in polite avoidance. He needed a file from the vault. He sent me an email request instead of walking the 10 feet to my desk. I needed to give him feedback on a project. I left a printed memo on his chair while he was at lunch. We moved around each other like two opposing magnets, the space between us charged with a repellent force. The silence was a physical weight. It was worse than an argument. It was an erasure. It was a confirmation of my deepest fear, that the night in the server room meant nothing to him, that I meant nothing to him. My old solitude had returned, but it was tainted now. It was no longer a peaceful sanctuary. It was a cold, empty prison cell, and I was acutely aware of who was missing. The quiet of the archives, once my comfort, now felt like a suffocating blanket. The ghosts of history were poor company compared to the living, breathing memory of him. By 5 o'clock, I felt hollowed out. I was packing my bag, eager to escape, to go back to my empty apartment and lick my wounds in private. I was a coward. I should say something, do something. But the fear of final, verbal rejection was paralyzing. The current silence was agonizing, but it still allowed for a sliver of pathetic hope. A confirmation would extinguish it forever. Leo, his voice. So close behind me, it made me jump. I turned around slowly. He was standing there by my cubicle wall. He looked terrible. His eyes were shadowed, his jaw tight. The confident armor was gone again, but this time it wasn't replaced by vulnerability. It was replaced by a raw, ragged exhaustion that mirrored my own. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, so no one else could hear. My heart did a painful, hopeful flip. I could only nod. He led the way, not to a conference room, not to the break room, but back down to the basement, back to the scene of the crime. He stopped outside the server room door, turning to face me under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway. He didn't make excuses. He didn't hedge. He looked me straight in the eye, and the words came out in a raw, pained rush. "I'm sorry," he said, "for how I acted Friday morning. Today. I'm so sorry. I thought you regretted it." I managed to say, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. He let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Regretted it? Leo, it's the only real thing that's happened to me in months. That's what scared me." He ran a hand through his hair, the same gesture of frustration from Friday night. "I've spent my whole life doing what I'm supposed to do, being who I'm supposed to be, for my family, for everyone, and in that room with you. I wasn't anyone's son or anyone's disappointment. I was just me, and you saw me." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. And then the sun came up, and I remembered all the rules, all the expectations, and I panicked. I ran. It was cowardly and stupid, and it hurt you. And spending the last 2 days pretending it didn't happen has been the worst feeling in the world. Being near you and not being able to look at you. It's worse than any fight with my dad. The dam of my own fear and anxiety broke. The relief was so immense it felt like weeping. He didn't regret it. He was just as scared as I was. "I've been hiding my whole life," I confessed, the words tumbling out, quiet but firm. "In this building, behind my job, behind the idea that it's just easier to be alone. I was terrified you were just another reason to prove myself right. Is that what you still think?" he asked, his voice soft. I looked at him, at the genuine fear and hope warring in his eyes. He wasn't a kid. He wasn't a mistake. He was a man, struggling and real, who had stumbled into my life and shown me what I was missing. "No," I said, and the word was solid. "True." I don't. A slow smile spread across his face. A real one this time. It lit up his tired features, and it was like the sun breaking through the clouds. "Good," he breathed. He hesitated for a moment. Then his expression turned serious, determined. "I don't want to hide in a server room, Leo, or in a basement. I want to be done with hiding." He took a deep breath, like a diver about to plunge into deep water. "Will you have dinner with me tonight? Out. In a restaurant. With other people, a date. A real, public date." It was a gesture so brave, so far beyond anything I would have dared to ask for, that it left me breathless. It wasn't just a meal. It was a statement, a promise, a tangible act of commitment, offered up in a sterile basement hallway. I felt a smile, a real one, stretch my own lips. It felt unfamiliar and wonderful. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that very much." The new beginning didn't start with a thunderclap. It started with the gentle, rhythmic sound of a coffee grinder on a Saturday morning. 3 months later, I stood in my kitchen, a place that had only ever been for solitary meals, and watched him. Kale. He was wearing an old t-shirt of mine that was too tight across his shoulders and a pair of soft gray sweatpants. His hair was a mess. He was concentrating fiercely on measuring out the coffee beans, as if it were a complex technical problem. He caught me looking and grinned that slow, easy smile that I'd come to know so well. It no longer held any challenge or arrogance. It was just for me, warm and open and full of a quiet affection that still, sometimes took my breath away. "You're staring again," he said, his voice husky with sleep. "Just cataloging," I replied, the old joke now a term of endearment between us. I walked up behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist and resting my chin on his shoulder. He leaned back against me, his body warm and solid. The scent of him, cedar and coffee and sleep, was the scent of my home now. We didn't talk much in the mornings. We didn't need to. We moved around each other in the small space with an easy, practiced grace. He made the coffee. I made the toast. With butter now. The silence between us wasn't empty or anxious. It was comfortable. It was full. It was the peaceful quiet of two people who had found their place. Later, we sat on my small balcony, the one that had only ever been for a single chair. Now there were two. We drank our coffee and watched the city wake up. His hand found mine on the small table between us, his fingers lacing through mine. The simple touch no longer sent a jolt of panic through me. It was a grounding force, a quiet reassurance that this was real. He had finished his internship. He'd had a long, difficult conversation with his father. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. He had enrolled in a master's program for information science at the local university. He was building his own life on his own terms, and he was building it with me. I looked at our joined hands. I thought about the man I was before him, the quiet, lonely king in his fortress of solitude. I had curated my life with such precision, eliminating every variable, every risk. I had mistaken safety for peace and order for happiness. I was an archivist of my own life, carefully preserving a past that had no future. Kale was the storm I never saw coming. He was the system crash, the catastrophic failure of all my defenses. He had walked into my monochrome world and painted it with brilliant, terrifying, beautiful color. He disrupted everything. He wrecked my routine. He forced me out of the basement and into the light. He was the plot twist in my quiet, predictable story. And as I sat there, his hand warm in mine, the morning sun on my face, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my story was so much better for it. I was no longer just observing life from a safe distance. I was finally, truly living it.